Welcome to the Teach Better Talk podcast, your official podcast for the Teach Better Podcast Network, the hub for all things education, brought to you by teachbetter.com. The Teach Better Talk podcast is committed to answering your burning questions through a variety of lenses and bringing new offers to you and your colleagues to help you thrive throughout the school year. My name is Ray Hewart, and we love your questions here on the pod. If you have any questions that you'd love us to consider as topics for future episodes, please share them with us by emailing info@teachbetter.com.
The topic this week is all about digital literacy. We are getting into those key questions. What is it? Why do we care about it? How do we introduce it to students and everything in between? Before we get too far in, I do want to give a huge shout out to Amanda on the Teach Better team. She is an incredible team member that actually writes all the I love you, happy birthday, thank you cards that all of you receive in the mail if you're a part of our Teach Better community. I know that I love getting my personal happy birthday card from the Teach Better team. And I love that Amanda does such important work sending little gifts to those of you who are celebrating something special or highlighting a loved one. So huge shout out to Amanda and the work that she does making this community so special. Another person that makes this community extremely special is our guest that we are having today. This is somebody that I have been a fan of for so long. I feel like we're having a celebrity sighting. Carl Azuz, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great. And I love how when a lot of times I'll meet people who've watched the shows I've hosted, they always say my name as if it's one. Like Carl and Azuz are separate, but I love how you did it because you're like Carl Azuz. And sometimes students at Chick-fil-A will be like, there's Carl Azuz, Carl Azuz. Hey, Carl Azuz, can I get a picture of Carl Azuz? It always cracks me up.
I have listened to the introduction. I know we'll talk a lot about the work you've done and what you're doing now, but I have listened to a lot of videos where you've said, "Hey everyone, I'm Carl Azuz," and so it just fits. It's in my head.
It cracks me up how two names became one, but it's happened. So hey, own it.
It's great. But I can say, if our community is not aware of you, today will be something that you'll not only enjoy adding Carl to your PLN, but also something that you will be bringing to your students on a daily basis. So we have a lot to dive into. Carl, if our community is not yet connected to you, who are you? Yes. What do you do? Tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I actually have two names. It's Carl and Azuz. I am the host of The World from A to Z. And what that is, it's a 9 to 10 minute nonpartisan news show designed to be appropriate for public school classrooms. And so we're going to cover what's happening in the world, but we're going to do it in a way that does not take sides. I want to present multiple perspectives, but not lean one way or another. We want to give teachers, people in the classroom, homeschoolers, we want to give folks another tool to bring in current events, but to do so in a way that is objective and in a way that adds value to the classroom, to what they're teaching, and also just to general American and beyond civics knowledge. So that's the show that I write, and I'm the executive producer and host of. I've been on the air. A lot of folks are familiar with my work, and I know you are, Ray, familiar with my work with CNN. I was the anchor of CNN Student News and then CNN 10 starting in 2017. And for many of those years, I wrote that show as well as anchored it. And so that's kind of been my professional life. My career out of college began at CNN, ran through CNN Student News and CNN 10. And then in 2022, I left CNN, had about a year of freelancing. And then we launched The World from A to Z last fall. So that in a nutshell is what I do.
It's amazing. Friends, this is good. Of course, if you're in the public school setting, we will focus on a lot of that during this episode. But if you are a parent, if you care about any youngster in your life, or if you're just looking for news that won't necessarily aim to depress you, this could be your news outlet too. This is a great short snapshot of what's going on in the world. And Carl, I have no idea how you stay so consistent with the fact that this is a daily experience. They can log on every single day to be like, what's going on this Wednesday morning or Thursday morning. I love that this is something that people can add to their routine.
Me too. And, thankfully with a 9 to 10 minute show, there aren't often slow news days. The new program is very international. I mean, part of it because it's called The World from A to Z, but the other part of it was I wanted to bring in stories from around the world. And some of these are the big, hard-hitting geopolitical events you hear about, but some of them are just slice of life cultural stories. Some of them we'll bring in because it's featuring a country we haven't talked about. What's going on in Nigeria? Does it have the largest country in Africa? What can you learn from something that's happening here, even if it's a fashion show in a Nigerian slum? We want to bring in elements and stories from all over the place so that, no matter who you are or what your background is, where you're watching, there's something in the show you can learn from, even if it's just seeing something unfamiliar. And so we love doing that. As I said, there's so many things happening around the world. There aren't very many slow news days for us, but you mentioned the consistency, and one thing that's so important for us is to make sure that when we cover elements of controversy, and practically everything in the news is controversial nowadays, we are doing so in the most neutral, nonpartisan way I know how. That's going to be paramount for us in The World from A to Z.
Well, and I've seen that modeled. I have to say that there obviously is a lot going on in the world right now. You guys can go back at any point. The show is live. Go and watch the show. It's perfect for the classroom. We'll talk about how you can incorporate that here in a little bit. But there has been some topics that you start talking about them, and I'm like on the edge of my seat with my teeth really clenched, being like, ooh, how are you going to talk about the war going on in Israel? How are you going to talk about the election without it being so controversial? And you guys do it beautifully. It's the news that I need, even though I know it's made for us to be using in the schools.
Yes. No, well, thank you so much for saying that. I mean, that's music to my ears. And, it's so, I'm not going to ever say I'm perfect at anything, but one blessing of being independent media is, there's no broader network initiative we'd have to adhere to. We are able to take these stories. If it's a new law that's proposed from the U.S. government, we're able to take something like that, distill it to the facts. This is what it is. This is what it would do. This is what it says. And then we can get into different perspectives on it, but hopefully in a way that keeps them weighted the same. I'm not trying to favor the people who love the law and the people who hate the law. I'm trying to explain it so that students, teachers in classrooms, in homeschool environments, or just somebody watching on a train is able to kind of say, okay, these are the different main schools of thought. These are things we can think critically about without necessarily jumping down the other side and, start clawing and scratching our point to silence the other. That's not what we're about. We want folks to be able to have a conversation or at least a basic understanding about the different major viewpoints on a controversy.
And I know so many of you listening work in all different types of classroom settings, whether you're in public, private, charter, I mean, you name it. We love that our community is so diverse. When we say in school systems, I think this is a great spot to have those conversations, even if in your community in which you teach, if there is a direction that they would suggest you lean, it's good to start conversations with the facts and with the bare bones, and then you can have those further conversations. So there's a lot here we can dialogue in. Carl, I want to ask you about your past, but before we get into that, I first need to know, when do you think it's most common for educators to incorporate this show into their daily classroom? I know that that's very broad. We're talking K-12 here, yes. But I know I have my opinion. I'm very biased. I know exactly where it was for me, my entire teaching career with students, but where do you see it most common?
I think what's really in our wheelhouse is starting at the middle school years. And I don't mean to, I welcome everybody. I don't care if you're 4 or 94. I want everybody to watch and to hopefully learn something from the show. But that said, the news itself is something that I don't have control over. We want to make our show as family friendly as the news allows. But sometimes there are some very heavy stories, whether it's the war in the Middle East you mentioned, or sometimes there are some hot button issues, Roe v. Wade, whatever issue might be coming out of the Supreme Court. I don't want to shy away from them. I want to present them in a way that's as family friendly as possible. And we won't go oftentimes into the lurid details or the violent details of something that happened, but we still want people to be aware of what's going on in the world. Because of that, I would usually say middle school is where I think most of our audience beginning, just because, there's a level of maturity where students are like, all right, this is happening somewhere else. Do I need to be concerned about it? I don't ever want, somebody to use the show with a super young grade and then have to worry about a parent saying my child's upset about something we saw. Certainly, I'm not going to turn viewers away, but anybody younger than the middle school years, I mean, we always encourage people to preview the show, but especially if it's younger than middle school, I think that's especially important because, as I said, I can't control what happens in the world. And sometimes for the elementary level, the events themselves might not be appropriate.
I think that's a great caveat. That I really appreciate that. Yeah. So then at the middle school level or the high school level, the college level, I mean, in a learning space where those students' eyes are probably at a maturity that can be exposed to the news on a daily basis. Do you see schools starting with this at the beginning of their day? Is this in a social studies class? Is this in a study hall? Do you have that information from teachers that obviously write into the show and talk about how they love it so much?
First of all, thank you for that plug. We hear from so many. I would say social studies is really going to be, the biggest portion of our audience, but it's not the only one. I mean, as we're producing the show, we have current events, civics, political science. We cover international political tensions. We cover just random slice of life current events. We have a lot of geography. And so all of these different elements of the social studies factor in so that most of the folks we hear from are going to be in those social studies fields. Now, that said, I've heard from English teachers. There are teachers who use it in homeroom. There are teachers who use it. Sometimes they say, this is something I'm thankful for. They're like, if the class has been good, we'll show it at the end. And I'm like, sweet, reward, love it. But there are, yeah, I mean, I'm like, hey, I don't care how they're watching. I'm happy to have folks watching. I really think that, there are some folks who will use it as a warm up, but we see a very, teachers from very diverse classroom environments and subjects using the show for many different reasons. And I welcome that. Especially if a teacher is looking for a jumping off space to discuss current events, to incorporate current events into the classroom in an objective way, and then to be able to discuss them with students in such a way that doesn't gang up on one kid for having a different viewpoint. That's something I think that one place where we add a lot of value.
I love this. Friends, I hope that you will let us know where you start incorporating this show into your daily classroom learning. I know for me in the classroom with students, I was primarily a math and writing teacher. I incorporated it a ton in tutorial, which was essentially our study hall, our homeroom. It was something that we could turn on if students were going to have lunch with in a classroom setting and we wanted some background noise. I know that I've used it in my math class as a brain break option as students are in different, friends, that I had a mastery learning classroom. Students worked at their own pace, but when you need a brain break, we usually allowed it to be about 10 minutes. That was perfect that they could throw on CNN 10 on their own. Now the new show, World A to Z, is going to be what they turn on. We had themed units when we had special themes that lent itself to the news. It was a way for us to use it as a bell ringer, depending on what was going on. So for all of you that are trying to find the perfect way to incorporate it, whether it's a reward or part of a routine, it's a really beautiful way to get students to still watch a video, kind of have that brain break, but have it be a really incredible learning experience as well. And I did really appreciate, Carl, I know you've said this a lot, but I did really appreciate that it was very neutral in the dialogue because, as a public school teacher, I never want to get in trouble with us pushing one way or another in any way, shape, and form. So I loved the neutrality of the show, and I love that continues to be a focus.
Yes, absolutely. And that's something that, it's such a, just a blessing of being part of independent media. We know that teachers, especially if you're going to show something in front of students, you're accountable to administrators, you're accountable to parents. You don't want somebody calling or showing up and saying, why are you showing this program in the classroom? And who is this person? To address that on the World from A to Z, we post everything we do at worldatozz.org. So anybody who has any concern to go there, see everything that we've done to get a sense of when we do cover something political or politically controversial, they'll get a sense of the objectivity we aim for, the fact that we're bringing in, okay, what do Democrats say, Republicans say? Is there a third school of thought? What else can we do to talk about it? But because we recognize that teachers who show media and classroom can potentially have to field questions or concerns from the folks they work with and the administration, parents, we want to be able to give them a resource that they could say, look, This is independent. This is objective. Their mission statement is to be appropriate for public schools and to stay neutral on controversial topics. And that's something I think that uniquely suits us on the World from A to Z. They can do that without having to worry as much about, if you have a program that's affiliated with a larger network, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, whatever it is, sometimes you're going to find people who are concerned about that. And so this is something that, because it's independent, it's separate from those major networks, hopefully it'll make people across the board more comfortable in using and watching it.
Carl, are you telling me, and I have like a million questions for you. This episode's going to be like 20 hours long, but are you telling me that this isn't a subscription model? Teachers don't need to spend like money out of their pocket to get this content. This isn't like a line item you need to put in the budget of your school or ask your principal for. This is all free?
Completely, 100%. We don't ask people to pay for anything. If they want to buy a mug with my goofy head on it, now they can pay for that.
There's a mug?
Yeah, we've got merch. We just launched it. I think about a month ago, we launched our merchandise store at our website. And so like, there's like a Fridays are awesome mug, and it's got like the outline of my face and my goofy McDonald's hairline. But yeah, there are little things if people choose to buy it. But as far as the program itself goes, the daily show, every episode at the website, worldatozz.org, and at youtube.com/@theworldatozz. Those are free. We post them. They're public. Check them out. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to subscribe. You don't have to give us your email address. All you have to do is click, and my head will pop up and start blabbing at you about stuff.
Isn't that not incredible, friends? You know I love a freebie. This is not only a freebie, this is an everyday freebie. This is like free ice cream every day for your class. I love this. I can't believe there's a mug. I'm going to have to go get that, Carl. I'm going to get merch. I'm a fan. I'm going to get merch.
A mug for my mug. Yeah, I mean, I tell people, you can buy the shirt off my back. Well, not the exact one, but one that looks just like it. But yeah, the merch store has been a lot of fun. We had a little segment we incorporated in the show that just kind of goofily played with it. But what's so gratifying to me is like within a couple weeks of that, folks are tweeting me pictures of them, wearing the shirt and watching the show. And I'm like, wow, that's absolutely fantastic. Very encouraging to us. And it's a thrill to see that happen. So yeah.
And I do want to give a shout out. Those of you a part of our Teach Better Talk community, a part of our Teach Better community, I love and value us being a part of a lot of different types of communities that really allows us to see the world better so we don't live in a bubble. This community with World A to Z has its own community of educators that share out and, like you said, tweeting funny pictures of their merch. Like, this would be a really good group to be a part of. It's a positive space where educators can share and people that are committed to, exposing their students to good information. So definitely go join that community as well by, following all the accounts and engaging with the tweets and posts that other teachers around the world are sharing. Carl, we have a lot to talk about, but we have to get to the major question today because that's why they pay me the big bucks. They got to let me talk about this major question. So we'll be right back. We're getting into digital literacy.
Quick pause to talk about Teach Better strategic development plans. No shade, but unless you went through our system, your professional development plans for your educators this year may not be up to par. Head over to teachbetter.com to learn more about how to strategically design your professional development plans with or without the Teach Better team to allow for each one of your educators to have a current focus to reach all of their learners.
What is digital literacy? It has the word literacy in it, so you all know that I'm not going to be a fan. I hate reading. I could never teach it. This is a scary subject. Friends, Carl has worked in this space for so long, and I know that we're going to be able to dive into this topic all week, but we definitely want to get into what digital literacy is, why it's important, and why, no matter what type of teacher you are, this is something you should be focusing on in your curriculum day to day as you're working with students, no matter what age they are. Carl, will you first start us off with talking about digital literacy? What does this topic mean? I mean, I could evaluate the word digital. I could evaluate the word literacy. I know media is a part of it. Where are we at?
There are so many different voices, especially on social media, competing for students' attention. And many of those voices either appear or act as if they are credible sources. And so, today you hear these buzzwords like misinformation and disinformation and fake news and all these different things going on. And so often they're used politically. They're used to, by both sides to try to tear down the other. Well, that's false, or this is false, and all of that stuff. I think, to me, what digital literacy, media literacy, what's so important in these topics is for students and teachers to have a reliable place where they can go to hear facts, and facts first before you start getting into the noise of opinions and things like that. In media especially, so often writers, reporters, anchors, producers, the whole production team, so often they're putting out information, news, current events through blue or red tinted glasses. And that's not a knock on any one specific network or group. That's industry wide. So often people are thinking, I'm going to use my position to influence. And that ain't what we're about. I was taught, and I made it, our show's mission, not to be an influencer, but to be an informer. And so when we talk about the importance of media literacy, especially in a sensitive place like a classroom in diverse parts of the country, sometimes classrooms themselves, very diverse places, we want to make sure we're presenting facts first, long before we get to the goofy puns I'm known for at the end of the show. We want to make sure we're presenting different perspectives in a way that doesn't judge them. And I think that helps people become more media literate, to understand what's happening, what some of the reasons why these events are important are, and also hopefully to be able to look at our show and other news media with a critical eye to say, am I hearing more from one side than the other on this? Did the world from A to Z get it right, or was there something they missed? As I said, I'm not going to claim to be perfect. I would love to have folks talk to us and share feedback and let us know. But in an environment that is so politically polarized and where so many people just want to hear their own side exposed, we want to make sure that when it comes to media literacy, we're giving people the facts. We're giving them information. We're giving them different opinions about it without judging or prioritizing one, and hopefully giving people a resource they can have to get dependable, reliable information in a sea of information that's increasingly becoming tainted with people's personal biases.
When I hear about these terms, I know we've gone back and forth between digital literacy and media literacy. I wonder, digital literacy is kind of what I heard as a kid. Now it's going away and moving into media literacy. Is there a reason that term is being used? I actually just want to clarify for our community here, because I know I misspoke a few times. If they're kind of using this term or seeing this term, media literacy is kind of more discussed and widely known now. Is that correct?
Well, it's certainly more in my wheelhouse. I mean, in terms of some of the, the different terms that folks use in classrooms, media literacy versus digital, it's not something that I feel like I'm super authorized to talk about, because it's not where my depth of knowledge is in those nuances and differences. But media literacy, because I've spent, my entire career in news. I started working in news 2 days after I graduated college. And so because my entire career has been spent in news media, what people call mainstream media and now independent media, one thing that I try to focus on is helping people to become better consumers of media. But as far as, differences between, or the nuances between digital and media, one big thing I can say is when it comes to whether you call it media literacy or digital literacy, you have to be very careful about what you see online, because so often anyone can say anything at any time online. And oftentimes there's not a major network behind it or an independent network behind it whose reputation is at stake. It could be just a podcaster, sometimes, or somebody, I should say, on TikTok. And sometimes when you hear this information, whether it's podcasts or TikTok, sometimes it's very thoughtful, well-designed, relevant information featuring expert opinions like you have on Teach Better Talk. And sometimes it's somebody who has no background in media, news, education, or anything, who's on TikTok. They might have 1 million followers. They might have tremendous views, but they're giving you an opinion, and it might not even be an informed opinion. And so I'm always telling folks, take what you see online with a grain of salt, investigate it, back it up, find a credible source you've heard of that corroborates that information, but Don't be so influenced that you're going to take action after seeing a single post on Instagram. Make sure you're getting a well-rounded view by going to multiple sources.
I love that we can focus on how we can teach this in the classroom, but a huge shout out to those of us who have absolutely been watching a TikTok video or an Instagram reel, heard something, and then we repeated it to somebody else as if we had read it in a research article. I mean, like, this is truly the world we live in now. I know I have been at fault where you're like, oh, I have this fact that I read. And really what you mean, this fact that you read, means that some pretty chick on TikTok told it to you while she was dancing around.
I mean, you bring up such a cautionary tale for so many of us. We've all done it. I mean, like, I'm not going to say, well, as a member of the media, I'm above. No, I'm not. I am a human being. And so, like, one thing, especially with our show, is if I see someone online sharing something, especially if it's a hot button talking point, who is this person? What are they representing? Is this a fact? Is this the whole picture? There's a big difference between recording a video with that narrow frame that people use on TikTok and recording it with the wide frame. And the reason I say that is to illustrate sometimes you can focus on one person or one event happening in a larger environment where the climate is totally different. And so I want folks to be able to say, look, this is a place where you can go on the world from A to Z, where you're getting an objective overview, but you're not getting Carl and his opinion because, you know, he's got a new filter and wants to show it off. I mean, Lord knows it would take more than a filter to make me Brad Pitt. And so what I'm saying is you've got to be so careful on Instagram, so careful with folks, because as I said, sometimes they have very well-informed opinions, something you can learn from. And sometimes it's just somebody spouting off or somebody who's very emotionally engaged in a topic, but not giving you the truth. And that's why, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what I really value about this dialogue is, friends, it's okay to listen to people's opinions as long as you're aware that they are opinions. And that's this beautiful dialogue that I know we'll be having all week and conversations we can have with students. The most important element of this is just identifying if it's a fact or an opinion. Not that you can't listen to everybody spout off whatever they want to talk about on TikTok, but being able to be aware, being able to look into really understanding what you're listening to. Is that fair to say?
It's perfectly fair to say, and it's so accurate and so succinctly put. You know, there are so many folks, as I said, who can say anything at any time. And to be able to differentiate between, okay, this is what this person's perspective is, or this is how this person is feeling at the moment, from these are actual news events, these are nuggets of information, these are events that truthfully happened, and then may or may not have that person's opinion. To be able to separate those two very different entities in media is so important for all of us.
So good. Friends, I know we can continue this conversation, but we're going to get into some major takeaways. I want to make sure you connect with Carl and all the work they're doing over at World A to Z. We'll be right back. Major takeaway time. You guys know that at the end of each episode, we are getting into some major takeaways from this episode. So in case you've been multitasking or have fast forwarded around as you've been driving to work or doing different things, we want to make sure you're able to take away those key points so that we can be better together here in the Teach Better family. Carl, if you were to reflect on, I know we've talked about so many topics, really focused on media literacy, if there was an important takeaway or two that we would want our community here to consider moving forward, what comes to mind?
Use multiple sources for news. Use sources you've heard of. A lot of times that can be a big difference. The major media organizations, and none of them is perfect, but the major media organizations do have a reputation to protect. And so even if they're writing through, as I said earlier, blue or red tinted glasses, a lot of times they do want to get the information correct before they might give you sort of a tainted or biased view or an opinion on it. So start with major organizations you've heard of, even if it's a local paper, a local affiliate. Very important to do that. And again, take what you see online with a grain of salt until you back it up with what you know is real information, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're hearing someone's opinion, especially if it's an unfounded opinion, and then sharing it with others, or speaking about it publicly in a way that presents that opinion as fact. That's where you see so much of what people call misinformation spread. So one thing we try to do on the World from A to Z, so often I am citing different news sources, and I'm doing it on air. I'm saying NBC News reports, the New York Times reports, Politico reports, the Hill reports, or the Reuters news agency, whatever it is. I'm trying to let folks know, give them a sense that we don't just use one source for information. We can't. We have to bring in many different perspectives, A, to get the facts, but B, to give people a well-rounded idea of what these different voices are saying. So again, use multiple sources, use sources of organizations you've heard from, and be very cautious about what you see and hear on Instagram or TikTok, especially if it's not coming from a major organization.
Well, and Carl, as a personal bias, I just really appreciate that you do all that research for me and I can just watch the show and get the information, because I don't really have time to watch 12 different news outlet articles. So I appreciate you doing that work for me. And I do want to make sure our community here connects with the work that's being done on a day-to-day basis for free. Amazing resource for educators, parents, homeschool families, anything in between. Carl, how can our community stay connected to that work?
The main place we post everything we do is worldatozorg. That's our homepage. Folks there can sign up to request a shout out if they want a mention for their classroom. They can also sign up, if you choose, to receive our daily email, and that'll give you a preview of the different topics we plan to cover. So, you want a quick rundown of the day's events or the day's news, or you want to see if something major that you are teaching about is featured on the show. The email is a good starting place for you to do that. And then we're also online at YouTube at youtube.com/@theworldatozz. You have to have that @theworldatozz on there. But that YouTube also provides different language translations. We have a lot of teachers who are using this show in an environment where the students speak Spanish, they students speak another language. And so sometimes those automatic translations can help in a big way for students to comprehend what they're hearing.
So many good resources, again, all for free. If you are a part of our Teach Better family, you want to make sure that you are exposed to the best resources for your kids. And this is clearly one that we are going to continue celebrating as the school year gets underway. Carl, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was truly such an honor to talk to you, but I'm going to geek out about this for the rest of the year. This is so cool.
Thank you so much, Ray. That's incredibly flattering. It's my honor to be part of your program on Teach Better Talk. The work you're doing and the experts, many of whom are far more expert than I am, whom you're featuring, adds so much value to the classroom. So I'm grateful that I could be a part of that community as well.
Make sure to stick with us all week long as we talk media literacy with a number of different perspectives that we'll be able to dive into different questions related to this content. And hey, if you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you are listening to Teach Better Talk podcast on your favorite podcasting platform, or also on YouTube with the Teach Better team. Don't forget to also go over to World A to Z and make sure you're subscribing and rating and reviewing everything you can there, because I know that helps us reach more educators, which is always our goal. Friends, thank you so much for being a part of the show. Carl, thank you again. This